Rangers fans, welcome to Liberty Blue, the essential New York Rangers podcast. I'm Andrew Chelney, alongside Nick Zararis. I'm still on vacation for a couple more days, so hence the different background. And I also might lose connection once or twice during the show. Apologies in advance. If you're watching or listening to this later on, we'll clean all that out for you. Well, Nick, I come to you with a mostly serious question. Did Ryan Lindgren save the New York Rangers by filing for arbitration?
No, because they're not going to buy out Trouba. It's that simple. If they were going to sever the cord, they would have found a way to make this trade happen. Instead, we had a column that got written like Saturday or Sunday of last week, and then it's been absolute radio silence from the team and everyone who covers the team. And they're all going to pretend that it wasn't reported by three separate people on the Saturday of the draft that a trade was in the works. Instead, it was, the Rangers never actually went to Trouba and said there was a trade in the works. And he never submitted his list until Monday. So someone somewhere is lying. It's very straightforward. Someone somewhere in the chain of information is lying, whether that's the team, whether that's the agent side of things. Someone in this chain of information is not being truthful because we are getting vastly conflicting reports as to what happened. For Larry Brooks to recant pretty much his entire column from Saturday, less than 48 hours later, tells me that somebody from one of the two sides was like, well, no, this isn't what's going to happen. And based on the fact that it's been radio silence and the prevailing narrative has been, it's Jacob Trouba's right to refuse a trade, not Jacob Trouba has to be traded to one of the teams that he's eligible to be traded to.
Even though he could be traded to half the league without saying anything. He could just be traded, but apparently he could still deny that as well, which doesn't make any sense, but that's beside the point.
Correct. That's the information we have right now. I am going to tentatively pencil Jacob Trouba in to be a third pair right-handed defenseman on the first penalty kill who makes $8 million per year. As for Lindgren himself, I think this is the bellwether signing. I know the ones they have looming on the horizon, Shesterkin, Miller, Lafreniere, are more important for the long-term vision of the team because like we talked about last week, Lafreniere probably doubling his money, Miller probably doubling his money, Shesterkin maybe 1.5-ing, 2.5 timesing his current salary. That's the end of all Rangers flexibility to improve the roster. Then you start getting into a situation where you're like Colorado, you're like Edmonton, where you need the reclamation projects. You need to take flyers on guys. You need to take over 35 contracts. You need to do bonuses that carry over into the next season to continue adding. And that's one of the ways the salary cap comes for you, that eventually you have to pay the piper for your mistakes. It's not just a way to mitigate teams from hoarding all the talent. It's also a means of making that if you make a mistake, you have to pay for it. Right now, the Rangers' only gaudy mistake on their books right now they're paying for is Trouba. Yes, they're not retaining. They don't have Gaudreau on the books anymore. But for the most part, that's the only real actively bad contract. Like even Zibanejad, that's pretty close to what he's worth, that $8.25 million. But be that as it may, being that we're getting radio silence, I think it's pretty safe to say both sides are trying to amend the current situation and work on finding ways to make this go forward. But it's going to be awkward. It's going to be uncomfortable. And frankly, I can't believe it's been a week and everybody's back to business as usual.
It just doesn't make any sense because again, we've heard so much about this is going to happen. We had insiders, we had Elliot Friedman and Emily Kaplan at the draft being like, "Oh yeah, the Red Wings are going to trade for him today." Like this was going to happen, and then somewhere along the lines, everything fell apart. And not only that, you're telling me that after all of this disaster fire going on behind the scenes, they're going to kiss and make up, and then just Trouba's going to be on the opening night roster. Everything's going to be okay. Again, this all goes back to you can't just shove everything under the rug and pretend none of this happened.
Oh, the Rangers do this all the time, though. That's the thing. The Rangers have done this very well because of the way.
You can try to do that, but it doesn't make it happen. You can wish for things. I can wish for the winning lottery tickets. But at the end of the day, we know that this happened. So regardless of how many times you kiss and make up in public, privately, we all know this happened. We all know that you wanted to trade Trouba. We all know you wanted this divorce to happen. And yet, let's just say he comes on opening night roster, he skates out on the Garden Ice. I would have to think he's going to get some booze. But that's just me.
And the one more thing that I should mention, At the end of that week, right going into the draft, I forget if it was the Thursday or the Friday, it was reported that Drury met with Trouba, that they asked for his list ahead of time. So you're going to tell me you sat down with a player 2 days before their mandatory turn-in date for their no trade list, and you didn't discuss trading him when you asked for his list 2 days early? Like, I hate to say we're getting our intelligence insulted here, but the story does not add up. And the Rangers have done this on more than one occasion where there are 3 versions of a story and the Rangers play it off and let it die. You know, we still don't know exactly what led to David Quinn and Jeff Gordon getting fired in 2021. You can believe the official narrative that James Dolan was upset that they didn't make the playoffs the season after they picked first overall, or you can believe that he made an impulsive decision, feeling embarrassed about what happened to Tom Wilson, and that they went behind his back. JD and Jeff Gorton went behind his back talking to other general managers about that statement they wrote about George Peros. Whichever one of those you believe, okay.
So we still don't know about we don't know the definitive story behind Georgiev. We still don't.
Yeah, Georgiev
there's a bunch of rumors.
Elias Anderson stuff. There are a lot of stories.
Bunch of little things, right? Yeah, the Elias Anderson stuff for sure as well. There's a lot of things that were leaked throughout the years that we still don't have a definitive answer for, but the fact that it happened earlier is what makes this, newsworthy. So the Rangers asked for it early. I don't know if I don't want to say if they leaked it or the reporters got the scoop or whatever. The reports were out there that the Rangers wanted to trade Jacob Trouba.
They had to sit down. They asked for his list. They had to sit down. They asked for his list, and you're going to tell me, "Oh no, there was no. We were never going to try and trade him." It's dumb. It is very dumb that this is the official narrative that's out there right now. Now we know we're never going to know what actually happened unless somebody wants to spill, and more likely than not, that would usually come from the player side of things. You only really hear about these things when players are disgruntled and they go to other places. Now, I'm under no illusion Trouba's doing the Rangers any favors. Frankly, he probably feels kind of embarrassed about what the team tried to do to him last week. And if anything, he's going to go out of his way to screw the team from that perspective, because he has never struck me as a guy who is entirely about being for the team with some of the things he does on the ice. Because if you were for the team, you wouldn't need to take all of these penalties chasing the game. You would try and actually play the game.
Right.
But I think there's a good chance that they asked for his list on Friday. He told them to go F themselves. And then him and his agent sat down. They looked around and said, what teams are not going to have enough cap space to acquire me or not have the assets to acquire me? And that'll be the teams I'm willing to go to. And I do think that's what happened. I think that's why it went from this trade is happening to nothing is happening. He was never going to be traded, because we know that's not true. We fundamentally know the Rangers were going to try, because if they weren't, why did they ask for his list? This is very straightforward. Even if you don't want to get into the speculation of he said that he might not be willing to go to a team, even if he's eligible to be traded there, which may or may not have been speculation, that may or may not have been in there just for stirring the pot purposes. That might be in there because Larry talked with Trouba's agent, and that's okay, we dare you. Try and trade me and see what happens. So until you get clarity, you can't know. And because we don't know, you have to assume he will be on the team to start the season next year. And what that means for the team is they're going to have to pinch some pennies somewhere along the line here. They're going to probably be in a situation similar to where they were 3 years ago, where they're going to go into the season with, $2 or $3 million in cap space once they take care of Schneider and Lindgren. They're going to bank up that space as much as they can going into the deadline if they manage the cap properly this time, which no guarantee.
Fingers crossed. Maybe they'll go 1 for 2. Maybe.
One for 2 is generous, in all honesty. This past year, they messed it up. 2 years ago, they messed it up. Hell, 3 years ago, even, they could have added even more than they did, and instead they just went for the Vetrano.
We talked about it before. I mean, all they had to do was put Trouba on LTIR at the deadline when he was actually hurt, get an actual defenseman to come, and then if you wanted to activate him, go ahead and activate him in the playoffs. You could have done that. You chose not to. That's on you.
Real missed opportunities. And some teams are more bold-faced in their allocation of LTIR. I know there's some conjecture right now whether or not the Oilers are going to start next year with Evander Kane on LTIR because he's dealing with a long-term injury that he may or may not get surgery for. And I know there's a lot of eye rolling from the other 6 Canadian teams and frankly people who dislike the Oilers in general oh, just when the Oilers need cap space, a guy they don't really want on the team that's massively overpaid is going to need surgery and miss the first 4 months of the season. Like, I get it. I definitely get it. But it frustrates me that the Rangers aren't playing the game this way because it's a tool there. And you're going to tell me that if he's so the logic we're going with is he said he was okay to play, played poorly, and that's it. That's the end of the discussion. Right. There's no process evaluation here. 2 years in a row with Lindgren, they really botched it where if they reevaluated their process and, they did change health trainers for the first time in like a quarter century going into the season from Jim Ramsey, we don't know. And frankly, it's frustrating that we don't know these things. Like, there are opportunities out there to improve the team, and you never know what could potentially be on the table. But it really does feel like they backed down. 3 weeks ago, it was, oh, Drury's going to be ruthless and do whatever it takes to win this summer. And now it's, well, we tried. It was too hard. Like we make fun of Chuck Fletcher for 2 summers ago when he said, I would have liked to get Johnny Gaudreau, but making cap space was hard. That's what you're telling me right now.
Right.
The same guy that was getting praised for being cutthroat for waiving Barclay Gaudreau is now the same guy who's too scared to try and facilitate a trade for a guy who he knows is making too much money. Like, even if we want to like separate the injury performance and the actual play, regardless of all of that, the biggest reason they were looking to move him is the cap space. If they made more cap space, they could have been a lot more active on Monday.
Sure.
That's why they wanted the list on Friday. They wanted to try and get the trade done Saturday, so that way they could go into free agency on Monday and make a splash. Whether it was Marchessault, Stamkos, maybe they thought maybe they could backdoor their way into Gensel, whatever. They very clearly had some type of plan, and it fell apart. And I would be remiss if I did not bring up, this is reminiscent of what supposedly, if you believe a certain narrative, about the Jack Eichel trade of, oh, the Rangers traded Buchnevich because they thought they were getting Eichel. They thought it was a done deal. Well, you don't have the goods in your hands until you have them. Until you have the receipt, until you file the paperwork, you don't have the trade. I don't want to assume, I do want to be fair because we don't know authoritatively what happened in these situations.
Sure.
But it's hard not to see this as a pattern.
Let us know.
It's hard not to see this as part of a longer recurring pattern, that the Rangers do not plan these things out long term, that they are going from choice to choice, as opposed to, okay, if I do this right now, this does what?
Right.
Same thing with Gaudreau. They waived Gaudreau without a real thought of, okay, what is this going to do for the other guys in the room? And now it's out there that they tried to do this with Trouba, and that you have to deal with the consequences of that. And I know you in particular and a few other Ranger fans have been very adamant that this isn't summer camp. We're not here to make bracelets. We're not here to be friends. At a certain point, it does get down to that. At a certain point, it does get down to, it's great. These are great guys. These guys are getting paid an unconscionable amount of money. I said it about Gaudreau, and I'll say it now again about Trouba. These guys are making top 1% of money of all humans who have ever lived in human history. Right. When Jacob Trouba's contract expires, he will have made over $60-something million playing in the National Hockey League, and he'll probably sign another contract after that. That is in the top 1% of all wealth of people who have ever lived in the history of humanity, going back 250,000 years ago, okay? I struggle to empathize with a guy who is dragging his feet and actively making my team's life more difficult. And then, whether or not Larry's speculating or that's the case, that's how I'm reading the situation. I am reading the situation as they probably could trade him, but he's going to drag his feet and he's going to make an acquiring team really go out of its way to accommodate him, or he might just not report at all and really make this impossible. Because that's how it reads to me. Reading that he may not report even to a team that he's eligible to be traded to is handicapping the leverage. That means the Rangers can't trade him, because who's going to trade for a guy who's not going to show up?
I mean, listen, and I make it a point to say that, obviously, if you're in the National Hockey League, this is not summer camp. You're not here to, have a book club in locker room. At the same time, I'm not here to suggest that, his wife's wishes don't mean anything, right? Because listen, I don't know the ins and outs of her career. I know she's
this is a hockey podcast, not a lifestyle or a couples therapy podcast,
right? But she's in the medical field. It's really difficult to get into the program, and she's in the program. I don't know if it's easy to move. There's a whole lot of things.
Hey, man, if you ask the Twitter experts, a third-year med student's pretty close to being a doctor, and they need doctors.
Listen,
so who knows?
I'm not here to pretend like I know, so I'm just going to tell you that I don't know. I don't. So I'm going to be honest, right? At the same time, when you're a hockey player or your relationship with a hockey player or whatever that's playing in the NHL, you understand that you can move at any time. Like, this is not a surprise. This is not a
Jacob Trouba seems to think this was a surprise, which it goes to again. This goes to show,
like real quick, it goes back to a couple of weeks ago. I think it was even last week we talked about this, where if he just said that he had a broken ankle and left it at that, it makes more sense, because he was an atrocity on the ice. You can love the guy. Watch him play, man. In those playoffs, he was really bad. All he had to say was he had a broken ankle, and a lot of that would have been more explainable. The fact that he was like, "Oh, I had a broken ankle, but I was fine in the playoffs." My brother in Christ, you had it out, and you threw it away. And
he does not strike me as a particularly aware person.
Being bad.
Jacob Trouba does not strike me as a particularly aware person. I'm just being frank. He does not strike me as a self-aware individual, because the way he talks about himself, you would think he was prime Chris Pronger, and he's the 6th or 5th best defenseman on this team. The one thing I did want to talk about today, because a lot of people have been saying, I don't understand why everybody's so pessimistic, because if you look at the changes in a vacuum, you're putting Riley Smith in the Blake Wheeler minutes, you're putting Kaapo Kakko in the Kaapo Kakko minutes lower in the lineup, and you're essentially swapping Gaudreau for Sam Carrick, even though I don't think Sam Carrick is going to be a regular. I think Sam Carrick is kind of on that Johnny Brodzinski tier of player where 40-ish games, I think him and Brodzinski will volley around. I think you'll see Edstrom at points on that fourth line. A lot of people are saying, why are you so pessimistic? Why do you think the team hasn't gotten better? Well, in a vacuum, yes, Riley Smith is better than Blake Wheeler.
Sure.
Kaapo Kakko going from playing on that first line with those guys to the third line playing with Hedl and Will Cooley, that's better. The fourth line, I struggle to think a fourth line of Sam Carrick, Matt Rempe, Jimmy Vesey will be good as the fourth line was at points last year, where Vesey, Gaudreau, and Brodzinski were really good at points. They were really good at points with Rempe in there, but be that as it may.
They don't trust, by the way.
That until we know what the plan is, and you won't know until training camp. Maybe Berard's in there, maybe Othman's in there, maybe somebody we're not even thinking of is in the mix as a possibility for a spot in that bottom 6. Maybe they do find a way to trade Kakko at some point in the next few months and get Othman in there, or get Berard in there, or get a player outside the organization in there. Maybe that's a possibility, but...
And again, and I want to reiterate, not to you, Nick, because you know this, but to fans that are listening, if you want to trade Kakko, that's fine. I understand it. Try to find somebody that makes $2.4 million or less that has the same defensive metrics that Kakko has. I'm just
looking for the toolbox. I'm looking for the defense first forward. Listen, that's what they need.
Listen, I would love for Kakko to score more points. Has it been disappointing that he hasn't been the offensive dynamo that a second overall talent should/needs to be? Sure. But he's still really young, and 2, he's already a really good defensive player. Find me somebody in the NHL that makes around the same amount of money, that has the same amount of particular skill set, that could still develop into a better player, that makes the same amount of money that another team is willing to deal. Like, it's trading Kakko is easy, in an ethereal mindset, but actually getting it done and finding a replacement that is suitable for that role that Kakko is occupying is not as easy as people make it seem to be.
He's a 30 to 40 point player, no power play time on the first power play unit. He never plays with Fox and Lindgren. So 30 to 35 points at even strength, like 4 or 5 on the power play, and solid defensive metrics. The problem is, and always will be, the shooting. Unless he gets a better shot, he's never going to be particularly dangerous, and that's the hole in his game. You look at the numbers, the underlying numbers with him, Kreider, Zibanejad were good. They shot like 4%. A first line in the NHL can't shoot 4%. It's really that straightforward. If you want to be a good enough team, they need to score more. They didn't score more. So Kakko, Hedl, Cooley is fine in the abstract. But the big reason, and there's more to this than just the stats I have that I'm going to pull up here in a second, because there's one goal stuff that alternates back and forth year to year, where the Rangers had a great record in 1-goal games last year, not as good Gallants last year. So that's the first point. This is where I want to start. The Rangers did win the President's Trophy last year. We all agree this happened. This was a fact. They won the President's Trophy. They had a great season. Teams that win the President's Trophy do not win the President's Trophy 2 times in a row. Very rarely. Last team to do it was Washington. That was about 10 years ago. They did it the 2 years before they went on to win the Stanley Cup. You look at the last 10 years of President's Trophy winners, almost all of them have a pretty big drop-off. The Bruins had about a 20-point drop-off. The Panthers had a 30-point drop-off. Colorado in 2021, that's prorated because that was only a 56-game season. Tampa Bay, this was Boston, slightly less. Pretty much all of these, are 10 to 15 points fewer than the previous season. It takes a lot to go right to win the President's Trophy. One of the things in that mix, and this is Panarin. If you see, you are looking at a very straightforward bar graph. This is not very detailed because it does not need to be. You compare Panarin's season last year to all previous seasons. He had a career year. You cannot dispute this. Guys do not have multiple career years in a row in their mid-30s unless they're on the juice, and this is 2003 in Major League Baseball. Unless Panarin is going to majorly buck trends. And the big thing is he took almost 2 times as many shots on goal as the year previous. I don't know if the Rangers are going to be able to get him, Trocheck, and Lafreniere to play as well. Maybe Lafreniere breaks through and Panarin doesn't have to do as much work, and that's a different conversation. But abstractly, when you're thinking about the big picture as to why you're probably going to be closer to a 100-point team as opposed to a 120-point team, and why your expectations should be different, it starts here. Panarin, your best forward, had a career year driven largely by a strong shooting percentage and shooting at the highest rate of any year in his entire career, on one of the best lines in all of hockey, playing the majority of his minutes with a top 5 defenseman in the world. What conditions can you repeat? Playing with Fox consistently? Yes. Can Lafreniere continue to play as well as he did last year? Yeah, probably. That's feasible. I think that's something you can kind of expect. Can you get Trocheck, Panarin, and Lafreniere to all simultaneously have close to career best seasons? I think that's a bit of a taller ask. I think the overall team success last season was so heavily tied to that one line. You think about it, Panarin had 120 points, 49 goals. Only like 3 or 4 guys ahead of him in points. Then you go to the next page. This is Jonathan Quick, who we talked about last week in regards to, I don't think you can realistically expect Jonathan Quick to give you 18 wins again. I think we talked about it last year in December. He had, I think, 11 wins on the year already by mid-December. And we said at that point, he wins 4 more games, he gets to 15. He's already more than worth what you got him for. He didn't cost a lot of money to begin with. You get 11, 12 wins out of your backup goalie. That's great. The save percentage, pretty in line with where he was the previous few seasons. The goal saved above expected was a massive swing in the opposite direction, and there's no doubting it. Quick was really good last year, like genuinely, really good. He was top 10 in goals saved above expected going into January. Then Shesterkin got on the heater, and Quick stopped starting as often, so he wasn't able to make up as much ground. But I think backup goalie is an area where the Rangers are probably primed for a little bit of regression. Next, this is Trocheck. Same kind of deal. You look at the 2 years with the Rangers versus the years with Carolina, where significantly more individual scoring chances, higher shooting percentage, more points, and all of that is tied to the rate at which that line played at. I don't know how realistic it is to expect those guys to do it again. If your plan is we're going to get more out of the existing guys, and that was the last slide, I don't know how realistic it is for the plan to be, we were good last year, but we can be better. That's the thing. I struggle to see a world where you can get more from the guys who are already here. Can Riley Smith be better than Wheeler and Kakko? Yeah.
Sure.
If Riley Smith gives you 45 points and he sneaks onto your second power play, that's great. That's better than what you had. That's still not addressing the Rangers' fundamental issues.
A lot of things went right for the Rangers last year. It
has to when you have a year like
lot
that.
of things have to go right for any team to make it, be the best team in the regular season. Sure, but Quick having a season as a backup for a lifetime was something that nobody predicted. Trocheck having an insane, like the best year of his career, just, dominating that line was not something we predicted. Lafreniere tearing through all of the season predictions and the bars that he was supposed to climb over and becoming one of the Rangers' elite offensive talents was something that not a lot of people predicted. And the things that we have to think about here is there's only so many times where and Panarin going on an absolute heater and scoring 1,000,000 points, not something that people thought, oh, maybe he could score 100 points, maybe some, but like him scoring as many points as he did was not something that people predicted. Like, so many unpredictable things happened last year to get the Rangers to be the best team in the regular season. You cannot, in good faith, turn around and say, oh, all of these unpredictable things will happen again and we'll be fine. You cannot say that in good faith. Now, could it? Sure. I'm not saying it can't, but you have to base your expectations and your predictions in reality. Is Kreider going to score 52 goals like he did a couple of seasons ago? Maybe, but I don't think he will. Like, I'm sure he'll score around the same amount of goals, maybe around the range where he scored last season. But a lot of things that were essentially best case scenario happened for the Rangers last season. Sure, is Riley Smith better than Blake Wheeler? Yeah, I mean, no one's arguing that. He's absolutely an upgrade. But 7 or 8 or 12 or 18 unpredictably good things happened for the Rangers to get them to be the best team in the regular season last year. You can't turn around and say, oh, they'll be just as good this year with the same roster. You can't. You can't roll 12 sixes in a row on a 6-sided die and think, I could just repeat that. Oh, it's easy. I could just here. Let me just do this again, and I'll throw 12 more die. I'll go 6. That's not how this works. Like, if you want sustainable success, you have to build a repeatable conclusion, a repeatable process. You can't just look into a solution and be like, oh, here's the formula for forever. I found it. When the formula is based on things that you cannot control.
I will amend what you said just ever so slightly, because the Rangers are a team that kind of bucks convention in terms of how they play stylistically.
A little bit.
And that's why you mentioned it, that, based on which statistical model you look at, and it's early. People like the Devils and they like the Hurricanes more. And I know a lot of people don't understand how gambling lines work, so I'll lay this out very straightforward. The lines are set up in a way to incentivize you to bet on them. The Rangers are priced third because they think more people would be willing to bet on Carolina or the Devils than they would to bet on the Rangers. That is not a reflection of what they think is going to happen. The lines are calculated in a way to try and get equal action across the lines. If they get too much action on a certain price, the line moves in a direction opposite of the value. So if a bunch of people bet on the Devils to win the division, their price, their odds will go down. That nothing has changed. But if a lot of people bet on something, the lines change. So it is the second week of July. There are still transactions to be made. There are still quite a few decisions that need to be made, not just affecting the Rangers, affecting the teams around them. And until you get a better read for where things are, don't sweat these things. Gambling odds, statistical model predictions, they're based on entertainment. They are trying to drive a conversation. They are not telling you anything. A statistical model gives you a prediction based on inputs. What are the inputs? Well, expected goals, scoring chances, goaltending, all of that stuff. That doesn't mean that's what's going to happen. We all know this. The joke the old heads love to make. Expected goals, expected by who? Yeah, exactly. They're going to play some games from October to next April. It is the second week of July. Everybody can take a deep breath.
Yeah. If you're mad now, you won't have the energy for October. I promise you.
You got to find something else.
Rangers fans are Rangers fans. I mean, every every team has fans that do this, but Rangers fans love to do this as well, where like whether it be Jay Fresh or like other gambling lines or whoever will post predictions in July or like lines of like, oh, the Hurricanes are, I don't know, like plus 220 to win the division or whatever. And like all of the replies are, well, what about the Rangers? What about it's like, brother,
the Rangers, the way the Rangers
July 8th, I need you to take a breather, step back, think about what you're doing, and maybe go buy coffee or something. Like, relax. It's early.
The way the Rangers play is never going to grade out favorably by the models or the markets. We all know the Hurricanes are always going to be amongst the favorites because the way they play translates to strong statistical success, which is what models like. Models like consistency. They like stability. The more wide-ranging inputs you put in, the more variance they give you. The Hurricanes are pretty consistent. Yes, they lost a ton of talent. No one's arguing they're not going to feel the losses of Teravainen and Gensel, Pesci, Shea. That's a huge brain drain of talent.
Yeah.
But most people assume the Hurricanes will be able to mitigate those individual losses because they have such a strong style of play that they've been able to churn guys out. They did lose Vinny Trocheck, and they were able to make up for it. They lost Dougie Hamilton, and they were able to make up for it. Now, that's a little more easy to predict as far as regular season success, that over 82 games, if you consistently outchance by volume your opponents, you're going to win more of those games. Whereas the Rangers, the model looks at the Rangers getting outshot 35-25, 50 of the 82 games and says, well, I don't know how to value goaltending, so I have to only value scoring chances for and against and expected goals. The Rangers get outchanced, they give up more quality. That means they're probably going to lose more games. The models aren't great at valuing goaltending. If you think the Rangers are a value, go bet the Rangers. If you really that's the solution here. That's the solution to this problem. If you feel offended or slighted by the lines, go bet on the Rangers.
If you're so slighted, then bet the house on the Rangers and then go buy a yacht when you win. Like that's, if that's how you really feel, then go out and do it.
The Rangers are going to be fine. Again, nobody doubts a team with Panarin and Shesterkin and Fox and Zibanejad and Kreider are not. No one thinks they're not making the playoffs. The conversation is not about making the playoffs. Yeah. We've been having this conversation for 3 years. The goal is to win the Stanley Cup. Have they meaningfully changed their status from good to great? No, they haven't. And that's why people are disappointed. It's not that Riley Smith isn't better, whether you want to say than Wheeler or Gaudreau or whatever. They still have Trouba. They still don't know if Zibanejad is ever going to get to the point where he's going to shoot the puck enough to impact the game directly enough to be the player they need him to be. And because of that, they have to be behind the Devils, the Panthers, probably Carolina, maybe Boston, maybe Toronto. The Rangers are probably 5th or 6th best team in the East on paper, maybe 4th, maybe 3rd, depending on how you feel when you shake it all out. There's a long way to go. The Rangers do have some aces in the hole. Maybe Lafreniere goes from 60 to 80. Maybe Brennan Othmann pops in and he gives them 45 points right off the gate, right out of the gate. Yeah. Maybe Kakko goes from 30 points to 50 points. Maybe Zach Jones can reasonably facsimile what Eric Gustafsson did last year. Maybe Jacob Trouba playing less minutes allows him to play a lot better. The Rangers do have things they can do in the opposite direction to make up for the fact that Trocheck, Panarin, Lafreniere probably aren't all going to have career years. Quick probably won't have the best year of his career in the last 5 years. Again, they have things in both directions. If you were to lay out a pros and cons list, there are things in both sides. The strongest factor the Rangers have, they're going to make the playoffs. That is the baseline. As long as you get in, you have a starting point. How can the Rangers get better in season? Well, they're going to audition guys. Where did Matt Rempe come from? Where did Edstrom come from last year? I have to imagine Berard, Othmann, Zach Jones, they will all get opportunities to play. And maybe there's some value there that you weren't accounting for. Maybe you get Kakko to break out finally. Maybe Lafreniere goes from a 60-point guy to an 80-point guy. Maybe he gets onto the first power play. Maybe Kreider finds a way to get up towards 50 goals as opposed to 40 goals. Maybe Zibanejad can flirt with 100 points. The Rangers have a wide range of outcomes, and it's hard to gauge them because they're such a volatile team. And that's why, and I got to go and do the actual work of putting together the record in 1-goal games. But that changes year over year. The record in 1-goal games is not something that's sticky. Individual player performance tends to be sticky over a long period of time, but team result, not so much, especially in 1-goal games. But the Rangers' one trump card is their best player is their goalie. The problem is, this is the last real chance. This is it. And we're going to spend the next, God willing, 9.5 months till the end of June saying, this is it.
Yep.
Once you pay Shesterkin, Lafreniere, and K'Andre Miller, it's over. There is no more changing. There is no more tinkering. At that point, it's over.
The conversation that we have, which we want more fans to think about, is Riley Smith better than Blake Wheeler? Yeah, sure. Are the playoffs a playoff team? Yeah, sure. Are the Rangers, as currently constructed, the one either the best team in the league or the best team constructed to win a Stanley Cup? Those are the two questions you have to ask yourself. It's not about, are they going to be good in the regular season? Are they going to make the playoffs? Could they get past the first round? That's not the conversation that you should be having with yourself and your friends. The conversation is, okay, Riley Smith, an upgrade over Blake Wheeler. Yeah, the top 6 is a little bit better now, sure. Is the bottom 6 better? I mean, getting rid of Goudreau and putting in Sam Carrick, is Sam Carrick even going to play? Okay, well, if he doesn't play, then who will play? What if Hedl goes down? Hopefully, obviously, doesn't happen. But let's say he does go down. Then what? Like there's a lot of question marks about this team that have yet to be solved. The blue line is still a question mark. Jacob Trouba is still on this team. Ryan Lindgren, who's filing for arbitration, needs to not play on the first pairing. I've argued bring Lindgren down. If you want to try K'Andre Miller up there, if you want to try somebody else up there with Fox, just see how it goes, because Lindgren Fox as a pairing do not play well together. They had a miserable playoffs, and it just doesn't look good with them on the ice. That pairing is still together. Trouba is still on this team. Is Braden Schneider going to be a solidified top 4 defenseman? We don't know. Is Zach Jones going to get the trust in the locker room by the coaching staff to actually play meaningful minutes when it comes to May? Is Matt Rempe going to get meaningful minutes when it comes to May? We don't know, because he didn't get it this May, and then the Rangers played 11 forwards and they lost. Like, the question that you have to ask yourself is, this team, as currently constructed, can they win the Stanley Cup? Everything else, while it matters to a certain extent, the answer to all the other questions don't matter if the first answer to number one question is no.
They don't need to be that good right now, but they need to be within striking distance of that by the trade deadline, so that if they make a meaningful addition or two, then they can be there. You look at the opening night roster last year, featuring Tyler Pitlick, Blake Wheeler, Barclay Goudreau, Nick Bonino. That team wasn't good enough to win the Stanley Cup. But if the Rangers can be reasonably in the mix, which, as we've said, they should be, they're going to have cap space to add at least one player. Are we going to watch the general manager get cold feet about parting with a good prospect for a rental? And because the Rangers are a very top-heavy draft, prospect pool, where really the only prospect that other organizations seem to be interested in is Gabriel Perreault, they don't have the luxury of maybe waiting or hoping. Because, again, we've talked about this a lot over the last 2 or 3 weeks, because I don't know how this isn't the biggest takeaway. You are on the clock beyond belief now.
Yeah.
Shesterkin, Miller, Lafreniere, and then Panarin, Kreider, Trouba. Once we get to that, you're telling me a team with the bones of Zibanejad, Trocheck, Lafreniere, K'Andre Miller, Fox, Perreault, Othman, you're telling me that's, and Shesterkin, obviously, you're telling me that 9 guys is going to be good enough after a group that had Panarin and Kreider wasn't? I really struggle to imagine a group headlined by Gabriel Perreault and Brennan Othman with Zibanejad and Trocheck in their late 30s is going to be a serious Stanley Cup contender. The clock has been ticking for a while. And, the Rangers pulled last year kind of out of their ass. It not like in they're not impossible kind of way, but like we've been saying most of this episode. Last year was the absolute best case scenario on so many different levels that it's hard to imagine that again. So we can contextualize it. Okay, well, are they going to be bad enough to not be a playoff team? No, they will be a playoff team. Sure. Can they win 45 to 50 games next year and make the playoffs? Yes. Yeah. Can they find a way to be competitive enough against whoever they're going to play in the first round, whether it's Washington, Pittsburgh, the Islanders, Ottawa, Buffalo, Detroit, one of those teams? Yeah, I think the Rangers can beat one of those teams.
Sure.
Can they beat the Devils? Can they beat Florida? Can they beat Carolina? Can they beat the Bruins? Now I'll hesitate a little bit when you ask me that question, but that's so far away from now. The last thing I wanted to touch on before we get out of here for today is until they get clarity on Trouba, until they figure out what they're doing with Lindgren, we're going to have to wait.
Yeah.
Based on the way there has been no subsequent reporting on either of those situations since they played out last week, we have to wait. Arguing about it is not getting anywhere. Anybody who's making this about Trouba's life as opposed to hockey, you're a loser. Just objectively. Anytime you're bringing up people's families or their personal lives, when we're talking about hockey, you're wrong. You are fundamentally wrong whenever you do that. So take a deep breath. Believe me, nobody wants him off the team more than me. But if you're going to...
Well, more than us, I should say.
Okay, fair enough. I didn't want to speak for you. I don't like when people speak for me. So
in this situation, I feel like you can.
Nobody wants him off the team more than us, but anybody making this about who he is as a person or his family is wrong, and you shouldn't be doing that. Make this about the fact that we can't get any actionable information from anyone in this situation. Make it about that, not about the people who are just trying to live their lives.
It is, and I thought you were not, so I cut you off. But unless I fundamentally say otherwise, I will never speak up. Whenever I personally will criticize a player, and I know Nick, you know this, but people, we get people coming in and out, new people every episode. It's like I will never attack Trouba directly, the person. By all accounts, Trouba's a nice guy, a good guy off the ice, and I'm not here to attack Trouba, the person. There's very rare times where I will actually attack the person. Like if you do heinous things off the ice, or maybe even on the ice, like we won't name names, but like if you do heinous things, then then the hatred will be a little bit more personal. But I don't hate Jacob Trouba, the human being. I hate Jacob Trouba, the hockey player. There's a difference. I very much dislike the way he plays hockey. I very much dislike his chicken wings. His chicken wing, ever somebody all. Because it happens often, whoever's on the other team will skate by him because Jacob Trouba is a very slow skater. So what he'll do instead, he'll try to chicken wing and try to take their neck and head off because he can't catch up to them. I really dislike that style of hockey, and I would like him off my hockey team, especially because he makes $8 million a year to do that. I'm not a fan of him. But again, I'm not here to be like, oh, Jacob Trouba, the person stinks. Like that's not what this is all about. And at the end of the day, if the Rangers want to win the Stanley Cup, this is what they have to ask themselves. Like, is Jacob Trouba, the hockey player, going to help us achieve the Stanley Cup? For me, the answer is an absolute no.
I mean, that was ultimately what was Edmonton's undoing. They had a defenseman who was unplayably bad, making way too much money, and that sank them. You can't have a defenseman that makes $8-9 million a year be actively bad and expect to win the salary cap, win the Stanley Cup in a sport where the salary cap is this low. In football, you can get away with one bad contract. In basketball, you can kind of get away with one bad contract if the rest of your guys are good enough. In hockey, Trouba's like the 11th highest paid defenseman in the entire league when you go by AAV. $8 million is a lot in the NHL. And yes, it'll get increasingly less over the next few seasons because the cap's actually going to go up now. But man, I wish we could have a civil conversation sometimes because I feel like we could make some real progress. That's the biggest drawback of a situation like this. Instead of turning this into, oh, well, Trouba's an asshole because he doesn't want to leave, the conversation should be, why can't we get any information as to what's going on? That's the conversation here, man. How can it go from the trade is going to happen later today, the Rangers asked for his list, he sat down with the GM to he was never going to be traded. The GM never told him he was going to be traded. It's just none of this adds up. And that's it. That'll be the end of it. This won't get brought up again until, training camp, where he's like, oh yeah, no, it got a little weird there for a while, but I'm glad to be back. And that'll be the end of the conversation. And
there were some conversations that we had, and then ultimately the best course of action was for me to continue to be the leader of this team and lead us to the Stanley Cup. That is going to be his day one answer. I promise. Yeah. If he's still here, that's verbatim what he's going to say.
And then Sam and Joel said, we had a conversation with Jacob Trouba before the game tonight. He had some difficult conversations, but him and his family are very glad to be back in New York.
Yeah.
Let's get to work. And that'll be the end of the conversation. When you've been in hockey, you've watched hockey long enough, you know how this stuff goes. Yeah. I don't want to say you could write the script, but you really can kind of write the script.
Well, you can, because it's the same 6 sentences over and over again. It is. Yeah. There's no changing this. You can write the script because it never changes. It's the same.
Just change the names. It's Mad Libs. Just change the nouns.
It's the same. He tries hard. He loves the game. It's the same. Oh, we got to play a full 60, get pucks in deep. Oh, he's a leader on and off the ice. Oh, everybody in the league likes the guy, or he's
got a great compete.
He's a great compete level. Yeah, he's a veteran. Everybody loves himself a veteran. It's like, all of these things tell me nothing about how good a player is on the ice. It doesn't. And your word salads, they might fool somebody. Like a casual.
You disconnected, my brother. I'm going to give Andrew one more second.
It's not what... Back? Oh, we're back.
Yes, you're back now.
Platitudes will only fool the casual fan. Platitudes will not fool anybody that has been around the block once or twice. You can only hear about somebody's compete level or how much they're well respected around the league until you fundamentally understand that doesn't tell you how good or bad somebody is during the game. These are all the same lines that we've heard over and over again. I've been on the planet for over 27 years now, and for the entire time, that's all I've heard from 99% of hockey analysis and interviews over the years is everything except for how the game actually went and how the player actually looked while they were on the ice. And that's the one thing I would love to change. One of the biggest things I like to change is I understand the NHL is a very old school and very, they're very against actually saying what's on their mind. I really wish the NHL would change that a little bit and start saying what's really on their mind.
I will leave you with the parting words of two people who know what they're talking about. First, the great Twitter poster / shit poster, John Rivers, who said, if the first thing you talk about is leadership, he's ass. Number two, to quote the great Greg Cosell, who works for a couple different football companies, talking about football players. It's great that people like him. It's great people want to hang out. It's great people went to his birthday party. It's great he has a sponsorship. Eventually, it's 3rd and 7, and he needs to throw the ball and get a first down. If you can play, I don't care. That is the end of the conversation for me.
Yes.
The first GM to accept that will go a long way. But be that as it may, general managers force themselves into corners, and they try and capture that secret sauce of intangibles because they're capped out. So they pay for leadership. They pay for grit because they can't afford to build a team of talented players. So that'll do it for this week's edition of the Liberty Blue Podcast. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple or Spotify, please be kind enough, throw the show a 5-star review. If you are watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the alarm bell to get a notification whenever new content goes live. Let us know, do you think Jacob Trouba will be on the team opening night? And number two, do you think the Rangers are better as they are currently sitting than they were going into last season? Andrew and I will talk to you guys soon.